Right, John Paul? Oops, here we go. Now it's live stream. Look at that.
I think we're doing it.
Yay. Congrats. Okay, well, hopefully you all have a copy of the agenda and had a minute to review it, even if it was a minute before you got in the Zoom room. But just want to check in and see if there's any adjustments to the current agenda we got from John Paul. Nope. Okay.
Lisa, can I add
Yeah.
a quick adjustment? And can we start with an acknowledgement and an announcement about the transition at STF?
Absolutely. That probably makes it a lot easier. Let's get that out in the beginning, and then we can keep coming back to that throughout the meeting.
Hey.
So I'll turn it over to you, Allison.
Okay, so STIA members and partners, you all received an email from me on the 29th announcing a big change for the Simsbury Trail Foundation. We've been working on our strategic plan and looking at the future and looking at all the good work that's happened so far, and in conversations with John Paul and the rest of the board about how we move forward, we've made the big decision that we're going to hire our first full-time employee at the foundation, and we are going to be hiring an executive director. We made the announcement, we've released the position description, and we hope that you can all help us find a great person to continue the good work that's happened so far. And we thank John Paul for all your excellent work helping to get us to this position so far. We could not have gotten anywhere close to where we are without your leadership and your hard work and all the Zoom calls, and really appreciate your help. And we look forward to continuing with working with you in a different role, continuing with your consulting work with Destination Management Advisors. And we'll be talking about that today and in conversations offline with partners moving forward. So thank you so much, John Paul, for all your good work. It's been really great working with you, and I look forward to continuing to do that. So if the rest of STIA can join me in thanking you very much for all your good work, John Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And a great group to be a part of.
Yeah. So turning it back over to you, Lisa.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Allison. So yet another transition, but boy, John Paul, the last couple of years, especially in one of the most trying times, keeping us all in a Zoom room and virtually going and keeping the momentum going, because it would have been so easy just to say, back burner, we'll get to this later, we'll get to this later. So you've kept it on the front and right out where it needed to be, especially with a lot of new members coming in and getting everybody up to speed. So I appreciate your passion for the trail, and I'm excited about our opportunity to continue to be working together and getting Bill out on that trail before Bill and I can't walk that trail together.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate it. That means a lot.
Yeah. Okay, let's give Bill a second just in case. Are you trying to say something, Bill?
No, I'm just saying that it might be my granddaughter that's the first one to walk the trail.
She'll be with you.
Sorry, I just kind of do that now.
We're going to get the first part done so you can do it then.
Okay, let's get that loop done there.
Exactly. So I think that's probably the biggest welcome to your STIA meeting, and the landscape, which is constantly changing, right? Which is kind of how we all got here to this place anyway. So I won't spend a lot of time going into a big welcome or a landscape. I just want to make sure that we all acknowledge John Paul, and we'll continue to do that throughout the meeting. And John Paul, if you want to just talk about just kind of take us backwards to bring us back forward and catch us back up and get us in the swing of today.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, I think there are probably a couple of adjustments to the agenda, but I want to draw attention to the goals. And I know I got this out late, so let me just pull the agenda up here and we can do a quick run through. The goals for the meeting today are, we're really continuing down the road of the conversation on alignment between STIA and STF and getting that more granular. We'll be pretty brief on the updates on the key initiatives. And then I put together some slides to give a little context of the last couple of years and where that leaves us. And really the crescendo of it is the project funding approach. So that is specific to infrastructure funds that can be pursued. So considering the shift in role, consider them my recommendations for moving forward. And I think it's consistent with the conversations we've had over the last couple of years, but really especially the last year. And then I think there will be some future conversation around STIA and STF and roles in implementation of the approach if it looks like it's headed in the right direction. All right. Well, with that, I'll go quickly through these slides, but again, just wanted to provide a little bit of context on where we are today and how we got there, and use that to prime the pump on the conversation about what's next. So I've been in this role for a year full time, and a year prior to that half time, and as additional context here, looking at the key initiatives that were adopted in the May STIA meeting and the strategic plan being adopted there, we'll center all of this around these goals here: strengthening STIA membership and structure and integration with STF, positioning the Salmonberry Trail as a priority project for public funding, which is what the majority of the latter part of the agenda will focus on. Solidifying ongoing funding and capacity for the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. And then we have developing sideboards, which we won't be touching on a lot today, but we'll keep top of mind. So it's kind of fun to think back all the way to August 2020. I hadn't been around for very long. And so I just pulled some slides from different decks that we've looked at over the last couple of years. The conversation started off with the implications of this partnership agreement between STIA and STF, and the very big task of a small nonprofit looking to get trail built, especially a public infrastructure project like this at the scale that it is. I look back at some of the slides I'd developed in plans even a couple of years ago, and to see the kind of optimism, rosy-cheeked optimism I had about what it would take to get the first stretch of trail down. And so want to acknowledge that, I've learned a lot in the last couple of years about the paces that need to be gone through for a project of this scale. And that, it likely will be significant federal and state funding that will allow the group to get trailed down sooner than later, or while Bill's around to walk it. This was just the beginning of an emerging business model where, for me, my perspective was, gosh, considering the numbers that have to be reached here, how can STF develop core competencies that will inspire capacity funding, backbone funding, and also allow the organization to bring in really large chunks of money. And I think there's an ongoing conversation around the dual roles of engaging the public and individual donor outreach, and also this core competency of being able to bring in really big pots of fund for sections of trail. So in order to make that business model work, we needed to add value to our partners. There'd recently been a few proposals out for capacity that weren't funded. So it inspired some rethinking about what that business model looks like, with the assumption of being able to capture project funds would inspire more capacity funding, more core backbone funding, and allow us to get and sustain project funding. I think that it's really good to just elevate every once in a while the scale of this project, that it is a $250 million project, that there's been a lot of effort over a decade already to get it where it is, and that will likely take another couple of decades to have the trail complete, or in an almost complete stage. And that's something that I think is really central to that conversation around infrastructure funding and engaging the public and managing expectations for how and when trail will be built. So bring us into March of 2021, we started to have more conversations around the evolution and the growth of STF as an organization, with a real focus on diversifying the board and having more perspectives that were a part of decision making, and getting ready for that increased capacity funding, which hadn't hit yet. And you can see, even back in March, we start talking about having a more robust feedback loop between STIA and STF, and kind of resolving some of the expectations between both entities and assumptions about the best approach moving forward. If anybody has any kind of questions or interjections, please feel free to. Then in May of last year, having had many conversations around the pacing of this and how to do enough focused work to really deliver on that emerging strategy, we acknowledge the importance of engaging the public, but really wanted to make sure that potential backbone funders, specifically the counties and Murdoch, that we were clear about what would add value to them and make STF a worthwhile investment. From there, defining and demonstrating that value by doing proposal development to get projects on the ground, to build some programming into the DNA of the organization, particularly around stewardship of the canyon section and DEI work. And we've done some of that, and there's certainly more to do. And then as we started to learn from the proposal development process and how we can be a good partner, refining that formula and scaling it. And then the idea being that as trail is down in both counties, a more broad and robust public engagement piece would make sense. Also knowing that there was opportunity to start to build a development program targeting major donors in something like a Founders Club. And the articulation of what the core competency for STF looked like at the time was this process of tracking and pursuing these infrastructure funds and building partnerships with local groups in each area where we would build trail, and then also with the agencies that are involved. And again, big thanks to Jennifer Purcell for all of the introductions and advice, and really making this a possibility by having access to those agency staff through Regional Solutions. In October, we'd cleared up, started to crystallize some of how the private funding would dovetail into the work. And that included the idea of creating an opportunity fund, which we got the initial seed funding from Travel Oregon for, and certainly need to build. This was maybe a little premature. I had come on as a full-time ED, but in a contract position. And so I think Allison will talk more about staffing plans and what's next for the organization. But we knew at that point recruiting board members was a real priority for the organization. And then we would hire a development director and project manager with those capacity funds. In January, STIA created the criteria for the phasing and prioritization map, which was a really good step forward because it gives more clarity into which projects would be pursued and how those could be paired with funding opportunities, which gives us an idea of the roles of STIA members in those proposal development, the role of STF in that, and led us to what we'll talk about in a little bit, being the project funding approach. And then in our last meeting in May, you guys adopted the strategic plan that was developed with those key initiatives that we just talked through. STF had just adopted a strategy as well. And we agreed on some next steps that would especially help create that alignment between STIA and STF. Those being the creation and convening of the STIA Executive Committee, including Salmon Berry Trail Foundation members, the recruitment of a couple of STIA members onto the STF board, increasing the clarity with about these specific opportunities that we would pursue, and getting more and more into implementation. So really replicating that model of getting public funding down on the ground. So in that last, in the last year and a half, the organization, with thanks to folks around the table, has secured over $1 million in capacity funding that will fund 3 full-time positions over the next few years. We have the award from Community Pass for the Rockaway Connector, which gave us proof of concept on the business model. An incredible amount of investment in relationships with agency staff. And Jay just retired. That's another one of our transitions here, but Bill has been really wonderful to work with, and the transition to talking with Mark has been really wonderful. So Mark is Jay's replacement. So that, and folks in DLCD, DSL, other agencies, city managers on the ground, really getting the relationships dialed in so that we had shared priorities, understood how proposing these projects and doing the work to develop proposals and winning the awards, how that's a win for folks, rather than just additional workload and asking them to do more. The approved strategic plans, I think, can be a touchstone for the ongoing collaboration and alignment between STIA and STF, which is a really central thing if this is the model that that the project moves forward with. And again, we've got new members in Allison and John, and a few new members set to come on. I think that's going to go a long way in helping deliver on that organizational growth for STF as well. And then, as we'll talk about in a bit, we've got quite a few projects lined up for public funding opportunities through 2024. And I think that if that is executed, it will set up more and more projects in the future in this rolling queue of projects that are having their scopes refined, proposals developed for that 30% design, and then moving into readiness for construction proposals, construction awards, and then construction to get the trail on the ground. So just as a refresher, it's been a little while since I put this visual up, and if it doesn't make sense, please let me know. We'll talk through it a bit more. But the gist of it is that STF can be a wheel that is turning, doing the legwork, finding the opportunities, putting together the partnerships to capture these public funding opportunities. And that STIA represents a suite of relationships and influence that will make those proposals more competitive, that will make advocacy efforts have a lot more legs than they would have otherwise, and that we increasingly integrated relationships with elected officials in pursuing those things. So adding the relationships and business model that's represented on the left to the funding opportunities in the funnel here to the right, including the growth of an opportunity fund to serve as cash match. That is the assumption on the best, leanest way to get trail on the ground, particularly considering the price tags that we're looking at. So I'll take a pause there and would welcome any feedback or input before we get into some project updates and then the funding approach.
Well, I'll just say that it's an incredible amount of work that everybody has done, and the last couple of years have been particularly difficult. You've all been on the Zooms together, and to be able to mark these as wins given the context is just kudos to everybody around this Zoom table for all the good work and getting both organizations to where we are today. And it positions us all much better for the hard work we have ahead of us to actually get to the place where we are indeed taking those first steps on the trail.
Yeah, same, Allison. And as you're sitting here talking, John Paul, Jennifer is off camera right now, but she's also transitioning. And I just keep thinking of all of these transitions, right? And all of the historical energy that's been here, but whether it was Tim and Doug and Ross, after that, I mean, it's kind of nice to have this little infusion of some different energy, but at the same time, making sure that we're transitioning and sharing that information and passing that along appropriately. And so as you're both talking, I'm thinking is a pretty good opportunity for us, maybe even our next meeting to be in person, and try to do maybe a little transition workshop conversation just to get us kind of all on the same page, or pass along any information that we can, because we've had a change at ODOT. We're having, John Paul pop off here. I mean, it just seems like there's constant change, and making sure that we have some consistency in that change to keep us on the right trail.
It's a great suggestion, Lisa. Yeah, thank you for that.
That would be great. I've really missed having an opportunity to be in person with folks more and get to know you guys a little bit better informally. So thanks for bearing with all these Zoom calls. And I do hope that I get a chance to work with you guys and meet you and see you in person at some point in the future. Cal.
Hey, I apologize for being late. First off, there were some distractions in my day, but and then my camera doesn't work. I mean, come on. So anyway, I'm glad I popped in. Even though I was late, popped in on your presentation. It's very, I'm still learning, John Paul. And so it's just really impressive to see all the work and the foundation we have. And even with all the transitions that are going on, I still think that we have a very positive foundation to move forward. So thank you.
Great. Agreed. Thank you. Well, I'm going to go through our prioritization map pretty quickly with updates here. And Bill, if it's appropriate to speak to any of the work in Barview, Garibaldi, I'll call on you. If not, I can give a quick update. Don't want to put you on the spot too much. So feel free to let me know in the chat.
Okay.
All right, so as you all know, we have a few priority projects that are underway at the moment, and we've got a real focus on getting trail down for the Unifier Loop, as well as our trail here in Rockaway. So easy does it. Deami and I have been working with the team at Parametrics, and we have a refined scope for the loop trail. And one of the goals of that piece of work was to get more clarity on current cost estimates, as well as be considered eligible for construction project through the Community Pass program. So that is a strong recommendation, is to move forward with a construction proposal for the loop trail. Those proposals are capped at around $6 million. And it looks like the paved surface cost is going to be probably between $4 and $5 million, depending on the section of trail and the amount of bridges, trestles, tunnels, things like that. So some will be less, some will be higher. All that to say that we have articulated a phased approach, which would prioritize getting soft surface trail down here, and then allow for a second phase to pave the trail, and then a third phase to put in the equestrian trail and do some more trailhead development and parking lot development. So that has advanced really well, and there's certainly opportunity to pursue public funds in the short term. There's also a conversation to be had around looking for planning funds for trail beyond that phase, essentially moving from Stub Stewart north and west. And there are a lot of layers to that conversation. Some of them are, what are the implications on land use planning application Could we get through the public engagement piece for the full additional 23 miles of trail in Washington County? With these planning funds are capped at 750,000, and our cost estimate in the parametric report is quite a bit higher than that, around 8 million. So we need to pick a piece of it to pursue for planning. And there's some strategy and conversation to have around that as well. That bumps us over to the coast, where I believe now funds have been released for the Rockaway refinement for that 2-mile section between Rockaway and Neocani. And as you guys know, that's refinement planning rather than construction at this point. And the decision on construction funding there is whether to pursue Safe Routes to School in 2023 or community paths in 2024. I think we're really well positioned on this project. Safe Routes has a higher match requirement, but it would also be a year sooner, and it would mean that we're competing against ourselves less, assuming there are community paths construction proposals teed up in 2024. And that would happen if there is a pursuit of design and planning funds for 2 or 3 other sections of priority trail along the coast as well. We're also building the extension path around the creamery, and that has been in process of wetland delineation. So we've got that report now. The next steps will be to submit that to DSL. It looks like, or actually the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's moving forward also. And then I'm going to pass it over to Bill for some updates on the work that ODOT has been doing specifically here around Barview to Garibaldi. Again, this very unsafe, complex, expensive mile of trail that is not only for the Salmonberry Trail, but will benefit the Oregon Coast Trail and potentially the Oregon Coast Scenic Bike Route as well. So Bill, over to you.
Great, thanks, John Paul, and good afternoon, everybody. Bill Jablonski. I am the ODOT area manager representing the agency for this effort. What John Paul said was correct. ODOT is actively engaged in scoping the section from Garibaldi to Barview. The original alignment that we got from parametrics, and I think we got from the foundation, was also to take the route along the bay side, which means filling in with jetty rock, and there's a whole host of complexity with permitting, jetty rock of that size with the Corps of Engineers. It opened up an opportunity to have a possible discussion with the foundation, with John Paul, on possible alternate route along 101. So John Paul, at some point, ODOT would like to engage again with you and the foundation on looking at some possible options as far as the route for the trail itself. Just to kind of give you some idea about the permitting, the complexity, the time frame, and maybe the impacts to some of the stakeholders in that area between Garibaldi and Barview.
Great, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it, and appreciate the great ODOT effort and resources you guys have brought to this. Any questions or discussion about progress on our current priorities? Mike.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we do a, excuse me, an in-person meeting, maybe we could meet along the coast and drive that section, just so everybody kind of has an idea of all the interests that are there and what you're thinking, Bill, and might be a short tour stop and then do the meeting afterwards in person. Might help us all understand what's going on.
I second that.
I know it's a tough spot, Bill. I appreciate you guys looking at it.
I'm in.
Where are we going to stand?
Bill will find us a spot.
There's a safety spot between the rail tracks and the highway itself. We can definitely find a spot to gather.
I'm mostly teasing.
And we could meet at our Tillamook office. I think we have space there for a meeting, so that'd be one opportunity.
That's an excellent idea, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, this section really does have some pros and cons. A lot of challenge as well too. Even if you look at the constructability, because the Port Tillamook Bay rail operations there with the Coast Scenic Rail folks would have to be out of commission for quite a while we actually developed this and constructed it. So there's a lot of trade-offs on either going the highway route versus the bay route. So those are some things that some of the minutia, some of the details that the folks in the foundation might need to help sort out.
You know, we had a public group there to help us put that coastal plan together. I don't think there's any magic there. If there's a better way to do it, I'm sure they'd all be amenable to that. Bill, you were probably part of that coastal plan, or somebody can speak to that, but so.
Yeah, we were, and we would be amenable to whatever works. It's just a tough section with OCSR being in there, and we knew that the cost would be exponential when we had OCSR involved in this. So
Yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, one of the options we also looked at was, is there a possibility of having a temporary route of this section of the Sunbury Trail, maybe more east of 101, if that would maybe be an option to at least get the trail connected with a future plan of some phasing to be able to bring it along 101 through this section. It is a very difficult, challenging section between Garibaldi and Barview.
Mhm.
Well, I appreciate you framing it up like that. You know, I think part of the conversation for this inflection point for STF is what its role is in planning, construction, public fund capture. And, you know, part of it certainly is the legwork of putting those proposals together, managing relationships with folks and agencies and in communities. But there's certainly an element as well of just the ongoing strategy, not only, not only of alignment and what's cost effective versus, you know, maximizing the user experience, but also in terms of how we're setting up sections of trail for future funding, either from specific opportunities or potentially in this case, the Federal Highway Administration. And that's something that Mark and I have started to talk about as well. This section specifically, you know, it is too massive to try to chip away at, probably with the existing programs like community paths, safe routes to school, those types of things. So I'd really recommend here looking at some federal funds that haven't yet been allocated and aren't necessarily designated for Oregon. Okay. Well, it's good to have a little conversation. I always aspire to talk less during these meetings, and I always end up talking quite a bit. So welcome those thoughts and interjections. All right, so I'm going to go into just a couple more slides on a more specific funding approach. So, you know, it's been an iterative process, and we're getting down into more specifics, which is a great place for the project to be. So this is a high-level recommendation for what it can look like to develop trail over the next several years, and basically puts into a table what it'll look like to do that work. So starting out with the Unifier Loop as a soft surface trail, again, we are really trying to roll the rest of the planning work into a construction proposal. So thanks again to Jerry and Washington County for funding that scope refinement piece, which hopefully gets us there. And if indeed a community pass proposal is prioritized, then that could lead to building trail in the next couple of years potentially. Then from there, moving into a paved surface and then equestrian, and then also working on the soft surface connector trails through Stubbs Stewart. And there are potentially a couple of different pots of funding that could be part of that, although it might be better to have that rolled into a larger proposal, the phase 1 or phase 2, to have less administration and to be able to cover those costs regardless. In terms of a general approach for the coast segment, we're in great position to have that Neoconi connector trail on the ground, or at least funded in 2023 or 24. And then could prioritize Wheeler, Bay City, north of Neoconi High and Middle Schools, or another couple sections of trail for refinement in this 2022 cycle, which would set up construction proposals nicely for 2024. And I've talked a lot about community paths. There are certainly other funding targets out there as well. And I'll go through these in a little bit more detail on the funding approach. Any feedback or input before I toggle over to the table that I shared with you guys? That was the PDF, I think, titled Salmonberry Trail Project Funding Approach. Okay. Then I will move over to that piece. And this is a more detailed look. I socialized the last couple of slides that we saw during the executive committee meeting a week or two ago. And Aaron and Allison both had some good feedback, specifically requesting the cost estimates that we have associated with each of these segments, and then how we might end up pursuing multiple targets for different sections of trail. So basically, we're just looking at a systematic approach for bringing in significant pots of funding for each of these projects, some of them in multiple phases. Some of them may or may not be, depending on how much funding is available. And then as we see, this would, over the next couple or few years, this is really specifically looking just through 2024. I think till the soil for bigger pots of funding coming down the pipe. So really the recommendation is looking at these existing programs, capturing as much funding as possible through them by choosing sections of trail that are in the phasing and prioritization map, aligning those with the criteria of these different programs, and chopping wood, always having a couple of proposals in for design and a couple in for planning, and then updating those targets depending on which pieces move through, which projects are awarded. And as they are, adding new projects to the queue and getting them through design and into construction. Quick note here that I have added the canyon and river segments with a note that for the canyon segment, that depends on ODF readiness. And so that keeps our focus for now on the coast and the valley. And for the river segment, having an eye on the lease negotiations with OCSR, I think it's going to be such a determining factor on cost that it probably should influence how that section is prioritized. And I'd recommend having a pretty sharp focus on the coast and valley sections while we wait for some more information. Okay, and guys, that was not the most updated version of it. So we have some more targets. Now I'm in the PDF that I sent with that. So very similar, essentially just looking at additional targets here in the construction target and design target areas. So I could see this, well, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there, and then I can expound on implications for organizational roles, capacity, roles of specific STIA members. But in general, would appreciate getting your guys' thoughts on this approach as it has evolved and is now getting quite specific.
So I'll start. So thank you, John Paul. This is a really great overview of the funding opportunities, and I appreciate the additional details of the funding targets and also the dates and the sources. Can you talk a little bit about the considerations for which funding sources to pursue versus others? As you look at there are multiple funding opportunities for a particular project. What are some of the considerations for choosing which one would be best fit?
Sure, there are quite a few. I think the two main overlays initially are the phasing map that has the criteria that STIA has established, and overlaying that with the criteria for the funding opportunities. So basically taking the top priority sections of trail as indicated by STIA with that criteria, and then seeing which funding opportunities best align with those sections.
Yeah, no, I mean, like in some of the options, there are multiple funding sources for one section.
Yeah, got it. So I think be aggressive is my recommendation. So in some cases that might mean pursuing multiple funding sources at the same time. So for example, Reconnecting Communities is a new pilot program from the Department of Transportation, and it closes in October. So there are a couple of conversations to have with Washington County about the strategy there, whether that would be the main target for phase 2 and community paths for phase 1, or if it makes more sense to pursue Reconnecting Communities for a bigger section of planning for the remaining trail in the Valley segment. And then also looking at the criteria of these opportunities, sometimes I think they don't want to see that you have another proposal in somewhere. And so that can make it less competitive. But if we can phase it and say this is a phase 2 proposal, pursuing phase 1 on another timeline, on an earlier timeline, and then having a conversation with a program manager if that phase 1 funding doesn't come through, to try to amend or refine what the proposal would be, but keep it around the same dollar amount. So it's really, some of it's going to be, what's the timing of the opportunity, and just pursuing what is right in front, and then reshuffling the deck on the funding approach as projects are awarded or not awarded. They're keeping them elevated as the top priority for the next opportunity, or moving through to another. And then you could have a big opportunity like the Metro Nature Bond, if it is feasible to get a request in for those funds, could that be phase 1 and 2 all at once? And I think that would be informed by the kind of the advocacy and relationship building and management that would happen leading into developing that proposal. It's all pretty fluid. It's all largely, many ongoing conversations at once.
Thanks.
I just appreciate seeing it in this context, and making it a little bit easier to kind of track, and then having some of those larger dialogues about other funding that might come up. Who's the champion? Who do we want to? It was a little bit easier for me to kind of wrap my head around. So thanks for the formatting change.
Great, glad to. I think that this approach, if implemented and resourced and valued, it could potentially lead to, I don't know, potentially 15, 20 million, maybe more by 2024 in construction funds. So, this is not only landing, the strategy here is not only landing that priority trail in each county, but also having other projects in the queue that would be awarded construction funding in 2024 and beyond.
Now we just got to go get it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the considerations there are the ongoing conversations around STF and its priorities and capacity, as well as where match comes for these different opportunities. How much of that will be available through the MISTET Opportunity Fund in Washington County and TLT funds in Tillamook County, and then what gaps we need to fill from there. And then what the expectation is on, how much is too much, how much is enough. Is the more requests for cash match funding, the better, because it means that opportunities are being taken. So definitely ongoing conversation there with
And I'll just say from the Cemetery Trail Foundation's perspective, we're looking at a both and strategy. So pursuing public funds is an obvious, we all agree that the scale and the opportunity for these type of funding sources are what's going to get the trail built. But then we also want to grow the community of supporters that can bring individual contributions, business contributions, and that public support to work in partnership with the funding requests. So, you know, the continuing to work with John Paul while also bringing in additional team members is critical. You know, we all recognize that one person is not enough to get this job done. We need a much bigger team, right? So that's really the aim behind all of our efforts.
Perfect. The capacity is what we've been lacking. I mean, having that, you know, allows us to be more agile, to figure out how we can go get these things and keeping it moving. So
yeah,
excited to hear that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're all in agreement about that.
Well, that takes us into our next agenda item, which is implementation of that project funding approach. And I think with some of the changes that are afoot, it is probably a higher level conversation than we may have anticipated. I do certainly think it can get down to a specific conversation about which STIA members are supporting specific opportunities. And again, of course, that's going to be getting some of Bill and his team's time anticipating proposal development timelines, and also those match conversations with the counties, as well as increasingly getting into advocacy type approaches and having our agency leads and elected officials being part of those conversations and campaigns leading up to the legwork to get proposals in. So we anticipated having some time for that conversation. Yep, so happy to hear folks' thoughts, or if it is potentially not the right time, we can pin it and circle back to it.
I think it would make sense for us to have kind of individual conversations with teams around some of these segments, so we can drill down to what makes sense and kind of how things are shaking out. Yeah, this is the, you know, you and I have had some initial discussions, but not this level of detail. And so I think it would be useful to schedule follow-up discussions with those individual teams.
Sounds good. Tiami or Bill, if you guys have anything to add in terms of, sorry, reading a message from, oh, okay, thank you. Rehana with the Metro Regional Solutions team has just joined us by phone. Thanks for joining, Rehana. Good to have you on.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Bill or Tiami, if you have any thoughts to share from the planning engineering perspective, we'd be happy to hear them. And of course, we can follow up in individual conversations as well.
I think follow-up offline would be good. I apologize. I'm just joining now, so I haven't seen the information. So maybe I can connect with you later, John Paul.
Sounds good. Understood. Thank you.
And then maybe Allison, as you're setting up the smaller team meetings, you can grab whoever you need. You know, even from here, like if there's folks that you think would be helpful or invaluable to those dialogues, just feel free to let us know.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I appreciate that. Will do.
Yeah, and John Paul, we've had some conversations offline about the certain ODAP programs and their match requirements, especially with the federal highway part of it, as long as they're adjacent to the highway. we have better success at possibly going for those. So I'd be glad to continue those conversations offline too.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Yeah, and I'll echo, this is Deani, just John Paul and I have had some conversations, and it seems like from the Valley segment, you know, the work that's needed there, the community paths program really seems like the obvious next step in targeting near-term funding, and happy to support you guys in that ask. I know that time frame is coming up here.
Great.
All right. Well, we may be the most ahead of schedule that we've ever been and will ever be. Now, Lisa, I'll pass it back over to you. We got the release out through the parks team later than I'd liked. I haven't seen any public comment, but I'll do a quick check in email here while I pass it over.
Okay, perfect. So our next STIA meeting, John Paul, I know you're multitasking, but if anybody else has it up on the calendar, let's look real quick and see if that's something we could consider doing in person, or if that is totally not doable for everyone. Because if that's the case, I think I'd rather put out like I can even ask Denise from my team to put out some type of calendar request to see if there's a date that would work for us to actually be in person for the next one. So can somebody help me with the date? I've already got both screens and I still can't find it.
I'm looking for it too. Sorry about that. It is
if anybody
on
knows
November 14th from 11 to 1 is what's scheduled.
Okay. And maybe you don't have to answer that today. I can follow up in an email to see if that's going to work. And if not, then we'll come up with a date that we could get in person. And it sounds like, Mike, you're willing to host us?
Yeah, I think we would be in Tillamook. I might be out of town though those days. I gotta check that.
I know the whole Zoom world allows you to be somewhere else and still in the meeting, so that may complicate things. So I'll take that offline and I'll get that out via email and figure out how we can find a date in November that would work for us to be in person, with Mike hosting us in Tillamook and Bill touring us and letting us see some of the more complex portions that we're going to have to deal with. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, that's great. And Lisa,
Okay.
I'll work with you on that agenda. I really appreciate your suggestion to discuss transitions. You know, that we live in a very transitional world. And so building in that kind of transitional resilience to the project is going to be a big piece.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. We'll work on that together then. All right. And so before we get into final board comments to see if folks had any other comments, I just wanted to take a minute, and Jennifer has been very quiet this meeting, but I think Jennifer's been on this meeting or in this project longer than I've been in this project, which I think I'm one of the veterans, but Jennifer and Mike are probably, and Bill, I'm looking at faces here, have been the longest serving. And Jennifer, I'm super excited for you and your next endeavor and super proud of you and can't wait for you to go off and do your next thing, but it's going to be really challenging for yet one more transition away from this project. So I know we'd be able to tap your brain and still ask you questions and get your help and maybe even your network of friends as we're moving this thing forward, because I know you care a lot about it too, but I wanted to just give you a minute to let everybody know what you're going to go do and the fun things that you're going to be contributing, and share any wisdom you have with all of us.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm so grateful that this meeting was scheduled for today so that I did have the opportunity to see everyone before I depart. I think several of you know that I've accepted a position with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission as the Future Ready Oregon Director. I will be overseeing implementation of the workforce investments that were made in the last legislative session, and looking forward to that. But that comes with a number of farewells, and one of those is the work that I've really just been privileged to be a part of, as the Salmonberry Trail has sort of gone from just a really crazy idea, I don't know, 15 years ago. Is that about right, Lisa?
Yes.
Through really all of the planning efforts and just all of the work that's been done by a number of folks on the call today, as well as others who have transitioned off of this group before me. But you absolutely, I'm not going far. You'll be able to find me staying in the state service. So looking forward to that, but won't be serving on the STIA board any longer. I'm glad Rehana was able to join us. She's been taking on some of the North Coast Regional Solutions team's portfolio of work, and I double booked her today. So apologies, Rehana, but super excited. And of course, Rehana's been engaged with STIA on the Washington County side of things. So she's very familiar with the project and familiar with the partners, particularly our Washington County partners on the project. So she will continue to be the Regional Solutions representative for this group. So there will be that continuity for sure. But boy, lots of things, all the memories are flooding back from the DEQ and EPA Brownfields grant. And I don't know if anyone on this call was involved in the site visit with EPA, where we toured the Tillamook County portion, the coastal segment, in a jail van, courtesy of Tillamook County. That is certainly a highlight. And then being able to be a part of the coastal segment planning work that was, of course, co-convened by then Commissioner Bartline, and then having the privilege of co-convening with Mike Cafferetta, the River and Canyon Segment Advisory Group. So again, it's just been a privilege to be part of this work, and I will join Lisa and Bill in hoping that I will be able to walk the trail or portions thereof sometime.
You will. The three of us will.
You will, yes.
Awesome. Well, Jennifer, it will be also weird to transition without you, but it just shows you how this idea is the right idea. It doesn't matter who's sitting at the table, right? Like it's the right thing no matter what. And there'll be new energy and different energy coming in behind each and every one of us. So thank you for all of your time. I'm super excited about your new thing as well, but super sad for all of our North Coast stuff because I rely on you for everything North Coast. No pressure, Rihanna.
No kidding. Jennifer, leaves big shoes. I definitely heard that from the city of St. Helens just now, but I'm really excited about the Salmonberry Trail project. It's on our metro region's priority list, and definitely have been in some of these meetings in the past, and I've worked with all of you. And so I'm no stranger to the project. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if I may be of any assistance, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Nice. Well, there'll be plenty of opportunity to catch you up to speed and bring you in. Thank you.
Hey guys, we had some comments from the chat on the YouTube stream. So I pasted those in the chat here and we'll just do a quick read. Marcia Kirk, who is a City of Banks counselor, is concerned about the high turnover with STF. Banks is in the process of developing a parking concept and needs to get more of a timeline on how fast STF can get staffed and back on track with the project on the East Side Connector with STUB. Does Alice or anyone with STF have an idea for us?
Sure.
Also,
So I'll respond. Thank you, Marcia, so much for your comment. I'll be in touch with you, and our plan is that we're not actually changing much. John Paul will continue with the proposal writing with the project. We're just expanding our team. You know, I guess if one person leaves a one-person team, that's high turnover. So I don't want to, but we're aiming to not have any loss of progress with our projects. So I can be in touch with you directly.
All right.
Yeah, with John Paul transitioning with us, because I had that same panic moment as well, Marcia, but then I was like, okay, as we talk through and he's still there with us, right? It's adding capacity. So
That's
it will
right.
be a little bit of a, shift trying to get somebody else up to speed, but with enough of us around, it's actually making us a little bit bigger and stronger. So little bump, but we got it.
Yep.
And then the city would like to, and friends would like to be in the STIA meetings. So that can be part of follow-up conversations around building out STIA and STIA membership. And then Marcia asked about being able to use Metro money in an area that's outside their jurisdiction. And Marcia, that's a good question. I think the answer is potentially. There's precedent with Chehalem Bridge being outside of the metro area. And I've done a lot of work cultivating relationships with Metro, and the Salmonberry is part of the Metro Regional Trails Plan. And a lot of that trail network would connect to it through the emerging Council Creek Trail. So I think there's a very strong case to be made.
And we can continue to look at what that membership stuff looks like. Okay, so we are to that point in the agenda. If there are final board comments before we adjourn.
Well, this is Bill. I'm in Maryland, and it's 95 degrees with 76% humidity. Now I know what a sauna feels like when you step outside. But we have hiked to several trails over here. They've got a real nice trail system here in Maryland. I was impressed.
Whoever you're visiting will come in a couple of years and talk about how impressed they are with the Salmonberry Trail too.
Yes.
I'm sorry about the humidity. That is something all of us that have experienced would never want to do it again.
No. My grandbaby's important, but next time I'm coming in the winter.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other board comments? Nope. Okay, well, then we are going to adjourn and give you the gift of time. Great job, John Paul, and keeping us. I think this is the fastest we've ever adjourned. So nice job, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.